Welcome. I'm glad you are here. Maybe the day has already faded behind you, maybe the room is quiet and you are resting, or maybe you are simply looking for a soft moment to let your thoughts drift. This is a space for calm curiosity, where science becomes story and story becomes something gentle enough to fall asleep to. Tonight, we will wander into a vast timeline, not of minutes or hours, but of hundreds of millions of years. It is the story of our planet and the delicate balance that has allowed life to persist upon it. Earth feels solid beneath us, immovable and permanent, but in truth it is fragile, constantly reshaped by the forces above and below, and throughout its history, that fragility has been tested. Life has bloomed, flourished, and spread into oceans, forests, and skies, only to be pushed back, diminished, or erased by great catastrophes. We call these moments the mass extinctions. They are not small losses, not just a few species vanishing into silence. They are global events, sudden, or stretched across millions of years, where entire branches of life's tree were cut away. They reshape the world, making room for some, erasing others, and reminding us that survival is never guaranteed. Scientists count 5 great extinctions in Earth's past, each with its own causes, its own mysteries, its own scars written into stone. And together they tell us that life is both resilient and vulnerable, enduring cycles of destruction and renewal. Tonight we begin at the threshold of that story, not yet in the extinctions themselves, but in the calm before them. Imagine the planet in its youth, still cooling from its fiery beginnings, continents drifting, oceans filling, clouds gathering. The stage is set. Life itself has appeared, fragile at first, single cells drifting in warm seas, building slowly toward complexity. For billions of years, these tiny forms prepared the way, breathing oxygen into the atmosphere, shaping environments, changing the chemistry of oceans and air. It is easy to forget how much of our world is a gift from those invisible ancestors. Without them, there would be no forests, no animals, no humans to wonder at the night sky. But their success also created a paradox. The more life spread, the more it became vulnerable to the changes of Earth itself. Volcanic eruptions could alter the air, continents could drift and disrupt climates, asteroids could fall from space and remake entire landscapes. And when conditions shifted too far or too fast, the balance was lost. Life was forced into silence only to begin again. This is what the story of the mass extinctions will tell us. A story of endings that make way for new beginnings, of chaos that gives rise to order again, of losses that shape what remains. And perhaps, if you listen closely, it is also a story about us, about how precarious our own moment is, balanced on the same fragile systems of air and water and soil that have collapsed before. But for now, there is no hurry. Tonight is only the beginning. Let the thoughts settle gently. 5 great extinctions, each one a turning point, each one reshaping the planet you walk upon. We will wander through them slowly, not rushing, not forcing, but following the path of time as it opens before us. For now, breathe and picture the Earth as it was long before the first catastrophe. Oceans alive with early creatures, continents still bare and shifting, skies painted with clouds that the earliest plants had only begun to change. The story is vast, but we will travel gently through it together. The Earth has always been restless. Its surface may look still to us as we walk across soil and stone, but beneath our feet the planet moves, slowly, invisibly, across the scale of human lives. Continents drift across oceans, mountains rise and crumble, volcanoes erupt and fall silent, and through all of this motion life has had to adjust, clinging to shorelines, burrowing into the seafloor, spreading across land when it could, retreating when it could not. Imagine looking at Earth not as a moment, but as a great breathing body, inhaling and exhaling across hundreds of millions of years. Each breath brings warmth or cold, abundance or scarcity, stability or collapse. And within those breaths, life has tried again and again to flourish. In the beginning, there was no certainty that it would. Simple microbes lived in oceans where sunlight could reach them, and through slow chemical dance, they learned to capture energy, to release oxygen, to transform the planet's air into something new. At first, oxygen was poison to many forms of early life, but over time, others adapted, turning what was once deadly into the very breath of survival. Out of that fragile balance came the possibility of larger creatures, cells working together, complexity building upon simplicity. This was the foundation. But even as life expanded, The planet reminded every creature that survival depended on conditions beyond its control. Ice ages spread across the globe, freezing oceans to their surface. Heat surged in other eras, with climates so warm that forests grew near the poles. Seas rose and fell, islands appeared, then sank again. Every change reshaped the stage, sometimes gently, sometimes with violence. For most of Earth's long history, extinctions happened quietly, one species at a time, fading into the silence of geology. But every so often something larger happened. A threshold was crossed, and life itself seemed to falter. Whole ecosystems unravelled. Oceans turned anoxic, stripped of oxygen, atmospheres filled with gases from immense eruptions. Or sometimes an asteroid arrived from the void, rewriting the story of life in a single instant. These are the events we call the 5 great extinctions. Each one is a story in itself, a reminder that life has never been guaranteed. And yet each extinction is also a doorway. After devastation, new forms appeared, rising to fill the empty spaces left behind. Fish evolved new shapes. Reptiles took to the skies. Mammals waited quietly until their moment arrived. Extinction is not only an ending, but also a beginning, a reshuffling of possibilities written into the fabric of time. Tonight, as you let yourself drift into this story, think of Earth as fragile, but also creative. Think of life as vulnerable, but also resilient. The balance can be lost, but it can also be found again. In the silence of night, imagine those long ages passing. Oceans breathing, continents wandering, life expanding, then faltering, then rising once more. Imagine whole forests blooming only to vanish, seas filled with creatures whose shapes are now only fossils etched in stone. And then imagine the continuity that binds it all together, the quiet persistence of survival across billions of years. You are part of that persistence. The cells in your body carry echoes of the very first organisms. The breath you take carries oxygen first made by ancient microbes. The bones within you carry minerals forged in long-vanished seas. To listen to the story of extinction is not just to look at what was lost, it is also to understand what remains and why. As we move forward through this journey, we will visit each of the 5 great extinctions in turn. We will drift back more than 440 million years to the Ordovician Silurian event, when sudden ice and shifting seas nearly erased life in the oceans. We will pause in the Devonian, when slow collapses reshaped reefs and silenced countless species. We will face the deep silence of the Permian, the greatest extinction of all, when almost everything vanished, and then follow the story of survival into the Triassic and Jurassic, where new life took form. We will end in the Cretaceous, with the fall of the dinosaurs and the rise of mammals, a moment that led directly to us. These are not quick stories. They are long, patient, like the unfolding of sleep itself. Tonight we begin only with the thought of them, the awareness that Earth has endured more than we often imagine. Let that awareness rest gently with you now. Life is fragile. The planet is fragile. And yet, it continues. And as your breath slows, you too are part of that continuation. Carried by the same rhythm that has held across ages, the story begins here, at the edge of time before the great extinctions, in the quiet knowledge that endings and beginnings are woven together. When you are ready, we will step into the first of these 5 chapters, to drift back into oceans older than memory, where the first great silence swept across the Earth. More than 440 million years ago, Earth was already alive with creatures of the sea. Land was still bare, with little more than patches of primitive mosses clinging to damp rocks, but in the oceans life flourished. Shallow seas spread across the continents, warm and full of light, nurturing coral-like reefs and strange invertebrates whose shapes would seem alien to us now. Imagine drifting beneath those waters. The light of the sun filters down in pale blue rays, illuminating trilobites scuttling across the sandy floor, their segmented shells glinting faintly. Brachiopods sway on stalks like seashell flowers, filtering the current for food. Early fish, jawless and armoured, glide silently, their movements slow and deliberate. Nautiloid cephalopods stretch long conical shells, hunting with tentacles as they drift like ghostly spears through the water. This was an age of abundance, a time when the oceans held extraordinary variety, each form finding its niche, each niche filled with something new. The Ordovician period was like a great blossoming, the seas crowded with life that had only recently evolved into such complexity. But abundance can be fragile. Conditions that seem eternal can shift with surprising speed. What began as small changes in the climate grew into something larger, something that would end in silence for most of these creatures. The story of the first great extinction begins not with fire or impact, but with ice. For much of the Ordovician, Earth was warm. Greenhouse gases held heat close and shallow seas spread wide, but slowly carbon dioxide levels began to fall. Some of it was locked away by the rise of new plants on land, tiny mosses and algae that drew carbon from the air. Some of it was sequestered by rocks and sediments beneath the seas. As carbon dioxide dropped, the balance shifted, temperatures cooled, the great warm seas began to contract. Ice sheets spread across the southern supercontinent of Gondwana, which lay near the South Pole. At first, the growth of ice was slow, almost imperceptible on the human scale, but relentless across millennia. Glaciers thickened. White reflected sunlight back into space, cooling Earth further. The oceans responded. As water was locked in ice, sea levels fell dramatically. Shallow seas retreated, exposing once fertile seafloors to air. Whole ecosystems that depended on those waters collapsed, not through sudden catastrophe, but through the quiet withdrawal of their home. Imagine being a trilobite wandering a reef where water once lapped gently overhead, only to find the tide never returning. Imagine brachiopods anchored in place as the sea drained away, their shells opening to emptiness and air they could not breathe. Life that had thrived in abundance now faced silence. Those who could adapt to deeper waters had a chance, but many could not. Species vanished, entire groups dwindled into memory. The first wave of the extinction was caused by this loss of shallow marine habitats, a slow suffocation by cold and retreating seas. But then, as the climate does, it shifted again. After millions of years of ice, the glaciers began to melt. Sea levels rose once more, flooding coasts and drowning the fragile ecosystems that had barely survived the first collapse. The waters returned, but they were not the same. They surged with the new chemistry. Glacial melt disrupted ocean currents, mixing layers of water that had long been stable. Oxygen was stripped from the deep seas, leaving anoxic waters that suffocated life. Creatures that had survived the cold now struggled in seas that no longer carried the breath of survival. The second wave of extinction swept through, compounding the loss. In total, perhaps 85% of marine species disappeared during this long crisis. Entire reef systems vanished. Many trilobites, once abundant, were reduced to shadows of their former diversity. The great nautiloid cephalopods diminished, their long shells fewer in number. Coral-like organisms that had built reefs simply disappeared, leaving behind barren seafloors. Imagine drifting above those oceans, watching once crowded waters now strangely empty. The silence would be profound, a reminder that life depends on balance more delicate than it often seems. And yet, through this silence, some survived. Small fish endured, tucked into ecological corners where oxygen still lingered. Certain trilobites clung on, adapted to deeper waters or hardier conditions. Simple organisms that could withstand low oxygen continued to thrive in places hostile to more complex life. These survivors carried the memory of the Ordovician seas into the Silurian, where life would recover, diversify again, and begin its next chapter. The Ordovician Silurian extinction was not caused by fire from the sky, nor by sudden catastrophe, but by the slow rhythm of climate, the swing from warmth to ice to warmth again. It was a reminder that life is bound not only to its own innovations, but to the vast, indifferent processes of the Earth itself. Picture the Earth then, continents clustered together in strange shapes unlike anything familiar today. Gondwana stretched across the southern pole, its icy expanse spreading outward, reshaping weather, reshaping currents, reshaping the very breath of the oceans. To the north, smaller continents drifted, their shallow margins once thriving with coral-like reefs now abandoned. The silence was not sudden. It crept across the seas like a long twilight, one habitat after another dimming into stillness. In those times, the boundary between survival and extinction was drawn by chance and adaptation. Creatures that could live in deeper waters, where currents remained steady, held on. Others that needed sunlight and shallow warmth vanished. Imagine an entire ecosystem collapsing not in a single night, but over countless lifetimes, each generation finding the seas a little emptier, a little harsher, until one day there was no generation left to remember. And yet, Earth has always been both destroyer and creator. The retreat of the seas revealed new coastlines, new environments, exposed to air and sun for the first time. Primitive plants crept farther across the land, spreading spores into the damp cracks of stone. In the oceans, as glaciers melted, fresh water poured into saltwater basins, creating layers, gradients, unstable zones, where new forms of life could one day emerge. Extinction does not only close chapters, it leaves blank pages, waiting to be written. The Ordovician Silurian extinction was one of the great erasures of life's early experiments, but it also cleared the way for recovery and renewal. In the Silurian that followed, reefs would reappear, fish would diversify, life would climb onto land in new forms. But in the moment itself, imagine the quiet. The reefs gone, the trilobites fewer, the nautiloids drifting through waters that once teemed with prey but now lay barren. Imagine the ocean floor littered with the shells of brachiopods, once abundant, now lifeless mosaics of calcium carbonate settling into silt. The silence would feel absolute, a vast cathedral of water echoing with absence. As you breathe slowly now, you can almost feel that ancient stillness pressing in. What makes this extinction so striking is its origin in subtle shifts. There was no asteroid tearing fire through the skies, no volcanic flood pouring instantly across continents. It was the Earth's own long breath, exhaling warmth into ice, inhaling cold into warmth again, each breath measured not in years but in millions of years. Life, so abundant, so fragile, could not adjust quickly enough. And yet, even in its cruelty, the Earth was not finished with life. The survivors were seeds carried forward. Small jawless fish, ancestors of vertebrates yet to come, hardy trilobites whose lineage would endure through more extinctions ahead. Algae and plants on land holding tight to rock, awaiting their moment to spread green across the continents. From signant sound would return. From emptiness, abundance would bloom again. And as we look back now, across nearly 500 million years, we can see this first great extinction not only as an ending, but as part of the larger rhythm of life on Earth. For extinction has never been final in the story of this planet. Each loss creates openings, each silence is followed, eventually, by new voices. The Ordovician Silurian extinction reminds us that the world has always been fragile, always balanced on forces far larger than life itself. It also reminds us that even in the deepest stillness, there is the possibility of return. The Devonian, sometimes called the Age of Fishes, a time when the oceans, deep and shallow, shimmered with diversity and strange armoured beauty. Picture the seas stretching endlessly, reefs larger than anything that exists today, teeming with corals, sponges, and fish of every form. This was a world bursting with innovation. The first forests had begun to rise on land, their roots splitting stone and sending minerals washing into rivers. In the oceans, armoured placoderms, fish with jaws lined in plates of bone, hunted with power unseen in earlier ages. Sharks, primitive but swift, patrolled the deeper waters. Trilobites still crept across the sea floor, but they were no longer the dominant rulers. Life was changing, diversifying, reaching new heights of complexity. And yet, within this flourishing, shadows were forming. The Late Devonian extinction was not a single blow. It was a long, drawn-out unravelling, stretching over millions of years, a series of crises that slowly pulled threads from the rich tapestry of life. Coral reefs, once vast and global, collapsed. Placoderms, the armoured fish that had ruled the seas, dwindled until they vanished entirely. Nearly 3/4 of all species disappeared. To imagine this extinction, you must picture abundance fading gradually, as though a painting of vibrant colour was slowly washed pale, stroke by stroke until only faint outlines remained. The causes were many, intertwined like the roots of the first forests themselves. Those forests, so new and green, may have played a role. Their roots pulled nutrients from stone, their fallen leaves fed rivers with organic matter. When these nutrients reached the seas, they may have fueled blooms of algae, suffocating waters, starving oxygen from marine life. At the same time, shifting climates brought cooling, glaciation, and lowered sea levels, shrinking the shallow habitats where much of life thrived. Volcanoes too may have played their part, altering atmosphere and ocean chemistry. The Devonian seas, once clear and life-filled, became layered, stratified, with oxygen vanishing from their depths. Imagine swimming there if you could. The surface waters warm and bright, fish darting, corals glowing, but beneath that a creeping darkness. Oxygen dwindling, silence settling, layers of lifeless water spreading like invisible tombs, creatures that could not rise to the surface perished, entire ecosystems collapsed without a sound. And yet, even in extinction, the Devonian told stories of resilience. Lobe-finned fish with strong fins that could almost walk found refuge in shallow, oxygen-poor waters where others could not survive. These survivors would one day crawl onto land, giving rise to amphibians, and eventually to all creatures that walk on four limbs. The Devonian, an age of fish, also planted the seeds for life on the land. But within its oceans, silence deepened. Reefs vanished, and they would not return in their former glory for hundreds of millions of years. Placoderms, once rulers of the sea, became fossils buried in silt, their armoured jaws preserved as echoes of a vanished dynasty. Trilobites, though resilient, shrank in diversity, their long dominance waning. And above all, the great vibrant coral cities of the Devonian were no more. As you imagine this, let your breath slow. Picture the ocean waves rolling over barren seafloors where once there had been forests of coral, fish darting in every direction. Now only scattered survivors drifted there. The silence of extinction is not always sudden. Sometimes it is a fading, a gradual dimming of voices until, at last, the chorus is gone. The Late Devonian stretched on like a slow dusk, millions of years of decline rather than one sharp catastrophe. Imagine standing on the edge of one of those first forests. Towering plants rise, their roots splitting rock, their leaves reaching towards sunlight. They seem like a triumph, but beneath the soil and in the streams that carried their debris, a silent transformation was underway. Nutrients rushed into lakes and seas, fueling algal blooms that robbed the waters of oxygen. Fish that once thrived in clear oceans gasped in suffocating seas. The shallows that had been nurseries became traps of stagnant death. In these times, survival was less about strength and more about adaptation. Creatures that could breathe air, even a little, found safety. Some lobe-finned fish developed lungs alongside gills, giving them an advantage when oxygen was scarce. These adaptations, born from desperation, would shape the course of evolution far beyond the Devonian. Yet for most species, there was no escape. The collapse of coral reefs was catastrophic. They were not only homes, but also the architects of ecosystems, providing shelter, nurseries and complex webs of life. Without them, countless species lost their refuge and ecosystems unravelled. Imagine diving into what had once been a reef, only to find skeletons of coral stretching lifeless into the water, the colourful fish gone, the waters eerily still. Volcanic activity and shifting continents also reshaped the seas. As land masses moved, they altered currents and climates. Ice sheets formed, lowering sea levels and shrinking the shallow marine zones where diversity had flourished. Each change seemed to ripple outward, small shifts compounding into global collapse. And as if the planet itself was conspiring, oceans became layered with dead zones, oxygen-depleted depths that spread like invisible scars. In these suffocating waters, even time felt heavy. Extinction in the Devonian was a drawn-out sigh, a fading heartbeat. The armoured giants, the Placoderms, once rulers of the seas, dwindled until they vanished altogether. Their jaws, lined with bone plates, once clashed in battles of dominance. Now they are found only in stone. Their dynasty ended not with a single blow, but with a long surrender to changing seas. Trilobites, survivors of earlier crises, suffered again. Though not yet gone, their diversity shrank, each extinction event chipping away at their reign. By the close of the Devonian, their glory was dimmed, a shadow of what it had been, and yet amidst the silence, seeds of the future endured. The lobe-finned fish, resilient in shallow, oxygen-poor waters, carried within them the promise of life on land. Their strong fins would become legs, their air-breathing sacs would become lungs. From these desperate survivors would come amphibians, and from amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and eventually us. It is strange to think that the suffocating seas of the Devonian may have been the crucible that prepared life for its next great chapter. Imagine now the end of the Devonian, the seas quieter, reefs gone, armoured fish absent, forests spread further across the land, their roots splitting stone, their leaves falling into rivers. Life had endured, but it was thinner, quieter, more fragile. The planet had reset itself once more. 3/4 of species were gone, leaving gaps that would not be filled for ages, and yet in those gaps new opportunities waited. The world was scarred but not silent. Life does not end easily. It adapts, shifts, finds footholds in the smallest cracks. And so, as the Devonian closed and the next age began, the stage was cleared for something new. The extinction had ended an age of fish, but it had also paved the way for life to rise from water to land, forever altering the course of the Earth. The Late Devonian extinction was a lesson written in silence. It taught that even abundance can vanish, that ecosystems can falter slowly, and that survival sometimes belongs to the small, the adaptable, the overlooked. As you rest now, let that thought drift through you. Extinction is not only loss, it is also transition. It is the space between what was and what will be. And in the hush of the Devonian's ending, the quiet foundation of the future was laid. The Permian period was a time of vast continents and strange creatures, a world both familiar and alien. Picture a single massive landmass, Pangaea, stretching almost from pole to pole. It was a supercontinent of deserts and mountain ranges, its size so great that inland regions rarely felt the breath of the sea. Dry winds swept across endless plains. Red rocks and dunes glowed under a sun that seemed harsher than before. Along the coasts, shallow seas lapped against the land, home to coral reefs, sponges, brachiopods, trilobites, and fish that had evolved since the Devonian. On land, life was equally diverse. Towering forests of conifers, ferns, and seed-bearing plants covered parts of the world. Reptiles of many kinds roamed, from sailback dimetrodons to early relatives of mammals, their teeth and jaws more specialized, their movements more agile. Insects hummed through the air, dragonflies with wingspans as wide as hawks swooping over swamps. Amphibians still lingered in rivers and lakes, sharing space with their reptilian cousins. It was a thriving Earth, complex and alive, and yet within this vibrancy, a shadow grew. The end of the Permian would bring the greatest extinction the planet has ever known. A cataclysm so vast that it would be called the Great Dying. Over 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial species would vanish. Life would come closer to ending than at any other moment. But in the beginning, it must have seemed like just another shift, another change in the long rhythm of deep time. Imagine standing on the shore of a Permian sea. The water is clear and warm, filled with reefs and swarming fish, but already currents begin to shift. Volcanic eruptions stir in what is now Siberia, vast eruptions that will not end for hundreds of thousands of years. Lava pours across the land in sheets, covering millions of square kilometers, releasing not only heat but gases, carbon dioxide, methane, sulfur. Each eruption sends shockwaves into the atmosphere, heating the planet, poisoning the air, darkening the sky with ash. The oceans respond to this onslaught. Warmer waters hold less oxygen, and so the seas begin to suffocate. At first, creatures try to adapt. Fish swim closer to the surface where oxygen is richer. Corals retreat. But as the heat builds, as the chemistry of the water shifts, survival becomes impossible. Reefs collapse, their builders unable to live in acidic hot seas. Trilobites, which had endured for hundreds of millions of years, finally disappear forever. Brachiopods, sponges, ammonites, entire groups dwindle to shadows or vanish. Picture the silence of a reef once bustling with life, now a graveyard of pale skeletons. On land, the effects are no less terrible. Forests wither in the heat and drought, rivers dry, soils turn to dust. Creatures that once flourished find no food, no water, no shelter. Insects, once masters of the air, decline drastically. The sailback dimetrodons vanish. Early mammal-like reptiles, though many are lost, leave behind a few hardy survivors that will carry the spark of life forward. Some scientists believe that methane released from seafloor deposits or from thawing permafrost added to the catastrophe, amplifying the warming until the Earth became a furnace. The sky would have glowed red with dust and haze, the air stifling, the seas stinking of sulfur. Imagine walking across a Permian desert. The sun glares down, the ground is cracked, and in the distance a forest burns. The air tastes of smoke and acid. It is a world unravelling. Yet extinction on this scale does not happen in a single moment. It is wave after wave, each blow weakening life further. Some species linger longer in small refuges, clinging to existence, but the overall pattern is collapse. The Permian extinction stretched across hundreds of thousands of years, a long agony rather than a sudden strike. And when it was over, the world was almost empty, but not entirely. A few lineages endured, tiny reptiles, small amphibians, burrowing creatures, and in the seas, ancestors of the mollusks and echinoderms that would repopulate the oceans. These survivors carried with them the resilience of all that had come before. Out of the devastation, a new chapter would begin, the Triassic, and from it the age of the dinosaurs would rise. But for now, imagine the Earth at the close of the Permian. The silence is profound, forests are gone, reefs are destroyed, the oceans are dark, low in oxygen, thick with decay, the air is heavy with heat and smoke. It feels as though life itself has failed. And yet, in that silence, in those few fragile survivors, lies the promise of renewal. The Permian extinction reminds us that life is both delicate and enduring, that even at the edge of annihilation, the story does not end. It pauses, it shifts, and then it begins again. Imagine the silence that followed. Whole ecosystems erased, skies clearer yet carrying a faint chemical haze, seas still but strangely lifeless. The Permian world, once vibrant with coral cities and fern forests, had collapsed into something sparse, a landscape marked by emptiness. Yet the earth did not stop turning. The continents still drifted slowly, mountains still rose and fell, rivers still carved valleys, and the moon still pulled quietly at the tides. Even as life withered, the planet carried on, preparing in its own way for what would come next. Scientists believe that the Siberian Traps eruptions were so vast that they covered an area nearly the size of modern Europe in basalt, layers upon layers of volcanic rock stacked like pages in a terrible chronicle. For hundreds of thousands of years, eruption pulsed and paused, never giving the Earth enough time to recover. Each new surge added more carbon dioxide to the air, more heat to the seas, more pressure on fragile ecosystems. The oceans turned from blue to green to black as oxygen vanished and toxic bacteria thrived, releasing hydrogen sulfide that poisoned the waters and even the air above. It must have been a world that smelled of rot and sulfur, a planet that groaned under the weight of its own fire. Some scientists suggest that this poisoning of the oceans released clouds of gas that drifted across the land, suffocating animals and killing plants. Others propose that global temperatures soared so high that the very proteins inside cells began to break down, making life itself unstable. Whatever the precise combination, the result was nearly total devastation. The fossil record becomes sparse at the close of the Permian. Whole families of creatures end abruptly. Trilobites, which had survived so many crises, are gone forever. Rugose and tabulate corals vanish. Many groups of amphibians disappear. On land, the diversity of insects collapses, something that had never happened before and has never happened since. The world contracted, its chorus of life reduced to whispers, and yet there were survivors. In the oceans, a few lineages of bivalves, gastropods, and ammonoids made it through. Tiny foraminifera, microscopic creatures that float in the seas, endured. On land, certain hardy plants adapted to arid, hot climates managed to cling to life. Some reptiles, small and efficient in their metabolism, survived where larger ones fell. Among the most important survivors were the therapsids, sometimes called mammal-like reptiles. Many perished, but a few small lineages endured, and from them our distant ancestors would one day emerge. It is humbling to think that in this time of near total loss, the thread that would eventually lead to mammals and to humans was stretched thin but never broken. The Earth lingered in this quiet aftermath for millions of years. Ecosystems slowly, painfully, began to rebuild. At first, they were simple, dominated by a few species that found niches in the silence left by extinction. It would take tens of millions of years for diversity to return to anything like what had existed before. But out of this slow recovery came innovation. New reptiles diversified, new plants spread across the land, new fishes filled the seas. And in time, the great archosaurs, the ancestors of crocodiles, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs, would rise to prominence, reshaping the world again. The Permian extinction stands as a reminder of how fragile life can be, and yet also how resilient. It shows us that the Earth itself can transform into something almost unrecognizable, and that even when the tapestry of life is nearly torn apart, threads remain, enough to weave a new beginning. Imagine yourself drifting now through that silence after the storm. The skies have cleared of ash, the land is dark basalt plains, the seas are sluggish and green. You're floating through time, watching forests regrow slowly, watching animals adapt cautiously, watching the planet heal in geologic rhythms. The Great Dying has passed, and the Earth breathes again, faintly, then stronger. From this recovery, a new age will come, an age that belongs to the reptiles that will soon evolve into giants. But for this moment the world rests, scarred but alive. As you let yourself drift, you might feel the weight of those lost millions of years, the silence of vanished species, the patience of survivors. And perhaps you feel also the quiet reassurance that even at the edge of annihilation, life endures. The Permian extinction was not the end. It was the darkest chapter, but not the final one. The story continued, and so do we. The world that emerged after the Permian catastrophe was quiet, fragile, but full of possibility. For tens of millions of years, life rebuilt itself from the ground up. Slowly, step by patient step, plants crept across the land again, rivers carved new valleys, and the oceans found their rhythms once more. Out of the survivors of that devastation rose a new caste of creatures that would one day shape the Earth in their own image. This was the Triassic, a time of experimentation, of new forms taking root in the silence left by extinction. Small reptiles scurried through fern thickets, early amphibians lingered in the swamps, and fish-filled rivers that wound across dry, hot plains. On the land, the climate was harsh, with vast deserts stretching across the supercontinent Pangaea. Yet even in that heat and dryness, life adapted. The first turtles appeared, their shells like shields against predators. Crocodile-like archosaurs prowled riverbanks. Small mammal-like reptiles, the cynodonts, endured in burrows, their fur thin and primitive, their nights filled with cautious foraging. And most importantly, the earliest dinosaurs were beginning to rise, small at first, swift-footed and lightly built, no bigger than a dog. They shared the land with many other reptiles, some of them larger and more fearsome. But slowly, quietly, they were preparing for dominance. For over 50 million years, this Triassic world grew richer. Forests of conifers spread across Pangaea, insects buzzed in humid air, and seas teemed with ichthyosaurs and plesiosaurs, marine reptiles that glided gracefully through the water. Diversity returned, though never in quite the same form as before. Ecosystems were simpler, more fragile, as if still recovering from the scars of the Great Dying. And then, as life seemed to have found a new balance, another catastrophe began to stir. Around 200 million years ago, the Earth entered a period of upheaval. The supercontinent Pangaea was beginning to crack and split apart, pulled by the restless motion of tectonic plates. Fissures opened in the crust, and massive volcanic eruptions poured lava across the land. These eruptions were not brief events, but part of an immense episode known as the Central Atlantic Magmatic Province. For hundreds of thousands of years, the Earth bled fire, releasing vast flows of basalt that covered entire regions and spilling greenhouse gases into the air. Carbon dioxide levels surged, and with them came rapid climate change. Temperatures swung wildly, oceans warmed, and oxygen in the water dwindled. As volcanic gases poured into the atmosphere, they triggered acid rain that scorched vegetation and destabilized soils. Whole forests withered, rivers turned corrosive. The delicate balance of ecosystems unraveled once again. In the seas, this meant disaster. Entire groups of marine reptiles vanished as oxygen-starved waters spread across shallow seas. Coral reefs, already fragile, collapsed. Ammonites, once diverse and abundant, dwindled drastically. Plankton communities shifted, destabilizing the very foundation of the marine food chain. On land, many reptile lineages that had flourished in the Triassic disappeared forever. Large amphibians, once rulers of rivers and swamps, faded into extinction. Entire branches of archosaurs, distant cousins of crocodiles, were lost. The world contracted again, its variety thinned by fire and poison. And yet, as always, extinction is both an ending and a beginning. In the silence that followed, some lineages rose to fill the empty spaces. The small, lightly built dinosaurs that had lingered in the shadows now found themselves with room to grow. Freed from competition, they diversified, spread, and began to dominate landscapes across the planet. What had been only one branch among many now became the ruling dynasty of the Mesozoic. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction cleared the stage, and the age of the dinosaurs began. Imagine yourself walking across one of those ancient volcanic plains, the air still shimmering with heat, the ground dark with fresh basalt. The skies are hazy with gases, the forest thinned, the calls of creatures fewer than before, and yet in the distance you see small herds of dinosaurs moving together, their steps cautious but steady. You hear the rustle of cicadas in the wind, the flutter of insects returning after the rain. Life persists, reshaping itself in the quiet aftermath. In time, these survivors will grow into giants, into creatures that define an era. But for now, the Earth rests in transition, scarred once again, but ready to begin a new chapter. In the silence after catastrophe, the Earth often feels like it is holding its breath. The Triassic had been long, a time of rebuilding after the greatest extinction ever known. But just as life began to weave a new fabric of ecosystems, the loom was torn apart again. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction did not strike in a single night. It was not a single asteroid or a single eruption, but a chain of upheavals stretched across hundreds of thousands of years. Imagine the ground trembling again and again as lava fountains rose skyward, darkening the skies with ash. Picture oceans slowly turning darker, heavy with carbon dioxide, their currents sluggish, their life suffocating. For marine creatures, every breath became a struggle. For the plants on land, the air itself grew sharp with acid rain, burning leaves, bleaching soil, poisoning roots. The world felt unstable, restless, like a fever that refused to break. For the creatures that had adapted to Triassic deserts, the sudden swings of temperature were ruinous. Winters grew unpredictable, summers sweltered with punishing heat, and storms came in violent bursts. Amphibians that once clung to rivers and lakes could not survive as water grew acidic and food chains faltered. Reptiles that had seemed unstoppable vanished. One by one, their lineages erased. Yet even in this instability, some creatures endured. Small dinosaurs, agile and resilient, learned to live in harsher climates. They needed less water, could move quickly to find food, and their eggs could hatch in varied conditions. Crocodile relatives, though many vanished, left behind hardy survivors that slipped into rivers and marshes and never left. Early mammals, tiny, furred and nocturnal, curled into burrows and waited out the heat, their sharp senses guiding them through the dark nights of a wounded world. In the vast stretches of time, the extinction pruned the tree of life again, but each cut shaped the branches that would grow after. With their competitors gone, dinosaurs rose. The Jurassic would see them expand into every corner of the Earth, their bodies stretching taller, heavier, stringier and more magnificent with each passing million years. They would become sauropods that towered like moving hills, predators that stalked like shadows, and creatures that filled the skies with wings. But in this quiet moment at the boundary between ages, they were still modest, still testing the ground, still gathering their strength. Imagine lying beneath the heavy air of that time. The sky glows orange with volcanic haze, the horizon lined with jagged black rock from eruptions that have barely cooled. The earth beneath you hums faintly with the memory of tremors. You hear little, the splash of a reptile slipping into water, the call of an insect over steaming pools, the distant cry of a small dinosaur moving through sparse vegetation. It is not silence, but it is emptier than before. The extinction has thinned the chorus of life, and yet even in that emptiness, the story does not end. The Earth has always known cycles of destruction and renewal. It is as if the planet itself requires these resets, these harsh purges, to clear the stage and allow something new to bloom. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction was one of those resets. Nearly 80% of species vanished, leaving the Earth quieter, simpler but ready. From that quiet, the greatest age of reptiles would rise. The oceans would recover first, with new groups of fish, new corals and marine reptiles growing larger than ever. On land, conifer forests spread widely, feeding herds of dinosaurs that walked like living mountains. In the air, the first pterosaurs would grow bolder, soaring over landscapes shaped by lava and time. Everything that came after was made possible by what was lost. And so, as you drift in this story, imagine the Earth as a patient teacher. It burns, it floods, it poisons, but then it rests. And in the resting, it prepares. Life bends, breaks, and dies. But it also changes, adapts, and grows stronger. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction was not only a tragedy of endings, but the opening note of a symphony that would last for over 100 million years. It was the fire that cleared the field, the silence before the roar, the shadow that makes the light to come feel brighter. The next age was waiting just beyond the smoke, and in it, the Earth would belong to the dinosaurs. The Cretaceous Paleogene extinction is perhaps the most famous of them all. for it ended the reign of the dinosaurs and opened the world to mammals and eventually to us. But tonight, as you let your breath slow and your body settle into stillness, we will not rush to the ending you already know. We will drift back into that age and let it unfold slowly, as if we were there, lying beneath the sky of the late Cretaceous, watching the world in its final flourishing. Imagine now a world alive with giants. The land was covered in lush forests and plains dotted with flowering plants. The air buzzed with insects that fed on nectar, pollinating blossoms that had only recently begun to paint the earth with colour. Herds of hadrosaurs, the great duck-billed dinosaurs, moved like rivers of life across open fields, their calls echoing like music through the valleys. Triceratops grazed on low plants, their horns gleaming in the light of the sun. Above them, enormous sauropods stretched their necks high to strip leaves from the tallest trees, while smaller raptors darted through the shadows like quick sparks. And presiding over it all, the apex hunters, Tyrannosaurus rex, towering and powerful, eyes scanning the horizon, jaws heavy with the strength of extinction itself. The seas, too, were full of life. Mosasaurs, vast marine reptiles with jaws lined in sharp teeth, cruised through warm, shallow oceans, snapping up fish and ammonites. Pterosaurs, some with wingspans larger than a small airplane, soared through the skies, gliding on the currents of warm air, their shadows rippling over rivers and coastlines. Coral reefs glowed with life, hosting countless fish, crustaceans and mollusks. Earth was abundant, crowded, vibrant, full of energy. It did not look like a world on the edge of disaster, but the universe does not reveal its endings in advance. For millions of years, the late Cretaceous was a thriving age. Dinosaurs had been dominant for more than 150 million years, weathering storms and extinctions before. There was no reason to think they would not go on forever. The forest grew denser, flowering plants spread wider, new insect species appeared in clouds of wings, and birds, the descendants of dinosaurs, refined their feathers and songs. Yet deep in the sky above, far beyond the reach of any creature's awareness, a wanderer was approaching. A rock the size of a mountain, cold and indifferent, had been travelling silently for millions of years. Its path through space had been drawn long before the first dinosaurs ever walked. And now, as if following a script written in the stars, it was on a collision course with Earth. Imagine the final day. The dinosaurs did not know it was coming. They woke and lived as always. Herds moved through forests, predators stalked quietly, oceans rolled beneath the wings of pterosaurs. But in the sky, if one looked closely, a strange light was growing brighter, a point of fire against the blue. Within hours, that point became a blazing star. The asteroid entered the atmosphere at tens of thousands of miles per hour. Friction with the air turned it into a white-hot torch brighter than the sun, and then it struck. Near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, in a place called Chicxulub, the asteroid slammed into the shallow sea. The force of the impact released more energy than billions of nuclear bombs. The ocean exploded upward in a wall of steam and fire. The ground convulsed, shockwaves racing outward at the speed of sound. Forests thousands of kilometers away caught fire instantly, mountains shook. A crater more than 150 kilometers wide and 20 kilometers deep opened in the Earth's crust. For those who were near, the end was instant. For those farther away, it had only just begun. A rain of molten rock, thrown high into the sky, began to fall across continents, igniting wildfires that spread without mercy. The atmosphere filled with smoke and dust, with sulfur and ash. Within hours, the sun itself began to dim. Days later, the Earth was wrapped in a cloak of darkness. Plants withered, without sunlight. Temperatures plummeted as the planet cooled rapidly. The oceans grew acidic as chemical reactions filled them with carbon dioxide and sulfur. Food chains collapsed in silence and starvation. The mighty dinosaurs, once rulers of Earth, faltered. Predators lost their prey. Herbivores found no leaves. The young hatched into empty worlds. In time, the vast herds vanished. The roars faded. The shadows of great wings were no longer cast upon the Earth. 3/4 of all species disappeared, not only dinosaurs but ammonites in the seas, pterosaurs in the skies, and countless plants and animals on land. It was an ending so complete that the Earth itself seemed to sigh with emptiness. Yet as with every extinction, life bent but did not break. In the shadows, small creatures endured. Tiny mammals, no larger than rats, scurried through the darkness, finding insects to eat, hiding in burrows, conserving warmth. Birds, the small feathered heirs of dinosaurs, adapted to new diets, new climates, new ways of surviving. In the seas, some fish and reptiles clung to existence, waiting for the waters to calm. And slowly, very slowly, the darkness began to lift. Ash settled, the fires burned out, the skies cleared, the sun returned, pale at first, then stronger, warming the earth again. Plants sprouted in blackened soil, forests began to regrow, rivers carried life once more. In the silence left by the dinosaurs, new voices arose. Mammals spread, diversified, explored niches that had been closed to them for ages. Birds took to the skies with new songs. The world had changed forever. The Cretaceous was gone, and with it the long reign of the dinosaurs. The Paleogene had begun, and a new chapter of life was opening. As you rest tonight, imagine the immensity of that moment. A single rock from space had rewritten the history of Earth, ending one empire and making space for another. It is a reminder of fragility, of how quickly abundance can vanish, but also of resilience, of how life rises again, no matter how deep the shadow. You are part of that story, a descendant of the survivors. Their endurance is in your blood. Their quiet persistence is in your breath. The Earth has ended many times, and yet it goes on, and so do we. The silence after the impact was not sudden. It deepened day by day as the fires spread and the skies remained dark. Imagine standing on a landscape of ash, the ground still warm from falling embers. The air smells of smoke and sulphur. The forest that once thrummed with calls of dinosaurs is now a wasteland, charred trunks jutting upward like broken teeth. Insects crawl over blackened soil, scavenging, and the occasional mammal darts quickly, desperate, small yet alive. This was the Earth in mourning, wrapped in a night that stretched for months, perhaps years. Without sunlight, photosynthesis faltered. Plants withered, algae in the oceans declined, and food chains collapsed. Great herbivores like Triceratops and Edmontosaurus, which depended on abundant vegetation, grew weaker. Predators like Tyrannosaurus rex, already stretched thin in their need for constant prey, found themselves with nothing to hunt. Each day was harder than the last, each breath heavier with dust. The mighty seemed doomed, and the small endured only because of their ability to hide, to eat what others could not, to wait. The oceans, once teeming with ammonites, fish, and marine reptiles, grew acidic from the fallout of the impact. Coral reefs bleached and died. Mosasaurs, those kings of the seas, vanished forever. The rhythmic crash of waves no longer carried the same vibrant life. Yet even here in the gloom, survivors held on. Sharks continued to circle in the deep, resilient as ever. Tiny plankton began to adapt to the darker waters, adjusting to new chemical balances, setting the stage for future ecosystems. It was a world stripped bare, but it was not empty. Slowly the Earth began to heal. As the dust thinned and light seeped back into the atmosphere, green returned. First as shoots piercing ash-covered ground, then as meadows, forests, and eventually vast new ecosystems. The Earth had been scarred, but scars are not endings. They are records, reminders etched into stone and soil. In that record, a new world was being written. The great age of reptiles was over, and the age of mammals was quietly beginning. Picture the first mammals emerging from their burrows, blinking against the returning sun. They were small, furred, nocturnal creatures, but now, without dinosaurs towering over them, new opportunities spread like open doors. Some took to the trees, becoming the early ancestors of primates. Some scuttled through grasslands, giving rise to new lines of grazers and hunters. Within tens of millions of years, mammals would grow larger, more diverse, filling every niche dinosaurs once ruled. But at that first moment, it was simply survival. The story of birds is equally remarkable. Descendants of the dinosaurs, they carried forward a legacy of flight and song. While pterosaurs vanished forever, these smaller feathered survivors adapted and thrived, giving rise to the astonishing diversity of birds we see today. Each one that calls out at dawn carries within it the echo of creatures who outlasted fire and darkness. Even flowering plants, though devastated, seized the moment to expand further. With insects still present to pollinate and new ecosystems waiting to be filled, they flourished across the continents. Forests grew richer, more colourful, and life rebounded into forms that had never existed before. The Earth had ended, and yet it was beginning again. Think of the asteroid itself, a silent traveller through space, arriving by chance or by inevitability to bring an ending that became a beginning. Had it missed, had it passed harmlessly through the void, Perhaps dinosaurs would still walk the earth today. Perhaps mammals would never have risen. Perhaps you and I would not be here to ponder it at all. There is a strange comfort in this thought, that catastrophe and creation are intertwined, that loss and renewal are woven into the same story. The Chicxulub impact was destruction, yes, but it was also a turning point, one that cleared the stage for new actors, for new songs, for new destinies. As you breathe slowly now, feel the weight of that truth. Life is fragile yet resilient. It can vanish in a moment, and it can endure through ages. You are part of that resilience, the distant result of creatures that weathered the darkest night Earth has ever known. When you feel small beneath the stars, remember, smallness was what saved life once before. Not strength, not size, but adaptability, patience, quiet endurance. And so, the Cretaceous Paleogene extinction, the end of the dinosaurs, is not only a story of endings, but a story of inheritance. We live in the world it created. Every mammal, every bird, every flowering plant is a descendant of that survival, and you lying here tonight are proof that from shadow comes light, from silence comes song, and from extinction comes renewal. Let that thought cradle you as you drift, that even in the greatest endings, there is always a beginning waiting just beyond. Tonight, as you breathe gently, imagine the world not in the deep past, but in the fragile present. The story of extinctions is not only written in stone, in fossils, in craters and ash, it is also being written now, in forests still standing, in oceans still alive, in skies that still carry the songs of countless wings. For we are living in what many scientists call the sixth mass extinction, an event not caused by asteroids or volcanic fire, but by us, by the restless hand of humanity. Close your eyes and drift with me into this unsettling truth, not to dwell in fear, but to understand, to remember, and to see the beauty that still exists in every fragile corner of the earth. The last great extinction ended 65 million years ago, clearing the path for mammals to rise, for primates to evolve, for humans to one day walk across continents and wonder about the stars. For millions of years, life rebounded, flourished, and diversified. Great forests spread, coral reefs bloomed, elephants marched across grasslands, whales sang across oceans, and birds carried colour and sound into the skies. The earth became abundant once more, alive with possibilities. And then one species began to alter the balance. Small at first, fragile at first, but clever, endlessly adaptive. Humans, with fire, with tools, with words, we spread across the globe. At first, we were only one species among many, hunting, gathering, surviving by the same laws as other creatures. But slowly, century by century, we learned to bend the rules. We hunted more efficiently, we cut forests for fields. We built cities where rivers once flowed freely. The world began to change under our hands. Imagine standing on a meadow 10,000 years ago. Herds of mammoths move in the distance, their massive forms stirring dust with each step. Saber-toothed cats wait in the tall grass. Giant ground sloths pull leaves from trees. The air is alive with life that no longer exists. Within a few thousand years, many of these giants would vanish. Some disappeared because of shifting climates as the Ice Age ended, but many fell to the efficiency of human hunting. It was the beginning of a pattern, one that grew stronger with time. Today, scientists estimate that species are disappearing at a rate 100, perhaps 1,000 times faster than the natural background rate. Amphibians, birds, mammals, insects, plants, all feeling the weight of change too swift to adapt to. Forests fall, oceans warm, rivers choke with pollution. Each loss is not just a name in a book, but a thread pulled from a living tapestry. And yet the story is not only of endings, it is also of awareness. Unlike the asteroid that struck the dinosaurs or the volcanoes that suffocated ancient seas, humanity can see what it is doing. We have the strange gift of reflection, the ability to pause, to change, to mend. Imagine drifting over the Amazon rainforest at night, stars shimmering above, and the vast canopy stretching below like a dark ocean of leaves. Within it lives one of the richest collections of life ever known. Countless species of birds, insects, frogs, plants, many unnamed, unseen, but vital. And yet each year swaths of this forest are cut and burned, replaced with fields, the smoke rising like ghosts into the sky. Now drift across the ocean. Coral reefs glow faintly beneath the waves, home to fish of impossible colours. But warming seas bleach them white, turning vibrancy into silence. Tiny polyps, which built reefs over millennia, die in weeks when the water grows too warm. These are not ancient stories buried in stone. They are happening as you breathe. The sixth extinction is not a sudden event, not a single catastrophic day. It is a slow unravelling, a steady dimming, written across centuries. Perhaps that is what makes it harder to see. There is no fiery sky to warn us, no single crater to mark the change. It is quieter, subtler, yet just as profound. And in the middle of this story, humanity is both the cause and the potential cure. Our hands destroy, but our hands can also restore. Forests can be replanted. Oceans can be protected. Species on the brink can be nurtured back into strength. Life, as history shows us, is resilient. Even after the darkest nights, even after the heaviest losses, green returns, wings return, songs return. The question is not whether life will survive, it will. The question is what form it will take, and whether we will be present in that story, not only as the force of destruction, but as guardians, caretakers, listeners. As you drift deeper, picture the Earth from space, a fragile blue sphere, wrapped in thin air, glowing faintly against the blackness. From that distance, borders vanish, conflicts fade, and only one truth remains. This planet is rare, precious, perhaps unique. It has carried life for billions of years, through fire and ice, through impact and silence. Now it carries us, and with us, the responsibility of care. The sixth extinction is not inevitable in its full weight. It is still unfolding, still within our reach to soften, to change, to guide toward renewal. The choice rests in how we live, how we imagine, how we act. And perhaps, in moments like this, when you lie still and let your breath slow, the choice also rests in how deeply we allow ourselves to feel the beauty of what is here now, the call of a bird at dawn, the shimmer of light on water, the quiet strength of trees. To feel it is to value it is to protect it, and to protect it is to write a different ending. Imagine walking through a city at dawn. The streets are quiet, only the distant hum of traffic, the flutter of a few pigeons on rooftops. Yet beneath the pavement, rivers once ran. Beneath the buildings, forests once stood. Every human space is also the memory of something older, something wild. We have transformed landscapes into patterns of stone and steel. But the wildness lingers at the edges, in weeds breaking through cracks, in birds nesting under bridges, in foxes slipping silently through alleys. Life does not surrender easily. It bends, it adapts, it finds space where it can. But adaptation has its limits. When change is too swift, too total, too unrelenting, extinction follows. And so, as you breathe now, imagine not just the world of the present, but the world that might come. Scientists speak of tipping points, thresholds beyond which ecosystems unravel quickly, like a woven cloth pulled too hard. The loss of bees and other pollinators threatens fields and orchards. The collapse of coral reefs starves fish populations and the millions of people who depend on them. The melting of ice caps raises seas, swallowing coasts where cities stand. These are not distant futures, they are seeds already sown. Yet even here, hope glimmers. Just as the Earth has survived 5 great extinctions, it holds the possibility of recovery after the 6th. And unlike the cataclysms of the past, this one is different, because its source is also capable of choice. You and I, humanity as a whole, can decide whether to be the asteroid or the guardian. Imagine centuries from now, a child walking beneath trees that grew from seeds planted in our time. Imagine oceans alive again with whales, reefs glowing with fish, skies streaked with flocks of birds reborn. The story of the 6th extinction does not have to end in silence. It can bend, it can soften, it can become the story of renewal. To believe that is not naive, it is necessary, for stories shape actions and actions shape futures. As you drift deeper into stillness, think of how fragile Earth is, and how vast its resilience can be. In the fossil record, extinctions look like sudden gaps, lines cut short. But between those gaps are millions of years of flourishing, of evolution, of beauty. We stand at the edge of such a gap, the 6th extinction, but we also stand at the edge of possibility, where our awareness can become a force as powerful as fire or stone. Close your eyes tighter now and imagine Earth breathing with you. Each inhale is a forest growing, each exhale is an ocean wave rising. In your stillness, you are part of this living world, not apart from it. You are not only a witness to this extinction, you are part of its unfolding story, and perhaps part of its healing. The silence of the night around you is not empty. It carries echoes of all that has lived and all that will live, the hum of insects, the songs of birds, the whispers of leaves in the wind. These are the voices of survival, of continuity. The sixth extinction may be named for us, but it does not have to be defined by loss alone. It can also be defined by memory, by care, by the choice to let what remains endure. One day, if future beings look back at this age, perhaps they will not see only the scars of extinction, but also the signs of guardianship, the places we chose to protect, the species we chose to save, the forests we chose to let grow. They will see not just the damage, but the resilience, not just the silence, but the return of song. For now, let yourself drift, resting in the truth that life has always found a way, even through fire, even through ice, even through shadow. It will find a way again. And as you lie here, calm, safe, quiet, you're part of that possibility. Let the thoughts settle gently in your mind. The sixth extinction is not only an ending, it can also be a beginning. And beginnings, like sleep, start in silence, in stillness, in the quiet pulse of breath. The night is quiet now. You have travelled with me through fire, through ice, through oceans rising and forests falling. You have seen worlds end and begin again, and yet in every ending, life returned. It reshaped itself, fragile and stubborn, flowing like water into every crack the universe left open. Close your eyes and let that resilience sink into you. Imagine Earth not as a planet of losses, but as a storyteller that has always found new chapters after catastrophe. Long before there were humans, before there were mammals, before even the first fish swam in the seas, this planet endured 4, 5, 6 great crises. Each seemed final, each tore apart the web of life. And yet, when the smoke cleared, when the ice melted, when the seas receded, life found a way to move forward. It was never the same life. The trilobites did not return. The dinosaurs remained in memory and in birds. Countless creatures vanished forever, but new forms emerged, new songs filled the air, new colours swam in the oceans. The story was never about perfection, but persistence. Think of the forest that grew after fire, black trunks slowly covered again in green. Think of coral reefs shattered by storms, later sprouting with new polyps that built fresh walls of colour. Think of human lives too, scarred but finding ways to begin again after floods, after storms, after grief. There is a rhythm in all of this, a heartbeat of survival that does not stop. You are part of it, resting now, breathing. Your body shaped by billions of years of ancestors who survived. Every cell carries memories of resilience, from the first bacteria that clung to volcanic rock to the mammals that hid in the shadows while giants thundered above them. That resilience lives in you. Let it calm you. Let it steady you. The earth is fragile, yes, but it is also strong. It bends, it breaks, and still it heals. Life is not invincible, but it is unyielding. In the silence of your room, you are listening to more than your breath. You are listening to the ancient pulse of Earth itself, the quiet rhythm of persistence that has carried through extinctions and rebirths alike. Imagine drifting now across time, floating above all ages, watching the planet's long story unfold like waves rolling to shore. Each wave is an extinction, a collapse, but each retreat is followed by a return. And when the return comes, it brings something unexpected, something new, something that could not have existed without the silence before. The lesson is not only that life continues, but that life transforms. Even in endings, beginnings take root. And so as you rest tonight, you can let go of fear. The story of Earth is not finished. It is still writing itself, one heartbeat, one breath, one dawn at a time. Drift with me deeper into that thought. Imagine Earth seen from far away, a small blue sphere turning slowly in the dark. From space you cannot hear the winds, you cannot see the individual trees, you cannot feel the tremors of continents shifting. And yet within that sphere there is motion, endless motion. Rivers still flow, clouds still gather, roots still push quietly through stone. That is resilience. It does not announce itself with noise. It works slowly, patiently, invisibly. Through every mass extinction, through every crisis, it was that same quiet persistence that made survival possible. The ammonites may have vanished, but their spiral shells left a pattern that inspired others. The forests burned, but their ashes fed the soil for future seeds. The great reptiles disappeared, but their feathered cousins took to the skies. Life did not simply return, it learned. It adapted. It reshaped itself with every fall. You lying here now are evidence of that unbroken chain. Your heartbeat is proof that resilience is not abstract. It is written into the pulse of your body, into the strength of your breath, into the softness of your skin that still endures the air, the light, the time that carries everything forward. Close your eyes and picture all that has survived inside you. The minerals in your bones were born in ancient stars that exploded long before Earth cooled. The water in your blood was shaped by rains that fell on the first continents. The oxygen you breathe comes from forests and oceans that endured extinctions and still found ways to live. You're not separate from that resilience. You're its continuation. And so, as this story draws to a close, let yourself drift with that awareness. The night may feel silent, but beneath the silence is movement. Beneath the stillness is memory. The earth remembers everything and still it turns. Let yourself rest in that turning. Let it hold you the way gravity holds oceans to their shores. You are safe here. You are part of something far older, far stronger, far more patient than worry. The great extinctions remind us that endings will come, but they also remind us that endings are never final. They are pauses, reshufflings, the clearing of space for something new. Life finds ways you cannot predict. And tonight, as you breathe, you are part of that mystery, part of that resilience, part of that endless story still being written.